Imagine yourself waking to the quiet rhythm of a suburban morning, the air laced with the faint sweetness of blooming jasmine and the distant hum of a lawnmower. The sun spills across your front porch, warming the wood under your bare feet as you step outside, coffee in hand, expecting the familiar view of your winding private road, the lifeline connecting your home to the world beyond. But today, something is wrong. The road, your road, is no longer open. A crude barricade of orange cones and rusted metal sawhorses blocks the path, their jagged edges glinting under the morning light. A handwritten sign, scrawled in Sharpie, declares, "Road closed by order of HOA." Your stomach tightens. This is no mistake. This is Karen. The neighborhood of Willow Creek was once a haven, a place where the soft rustle of oak leaves and the chatter of evening crickets wove a comforting tapestry around the lives of its residents. For you, a homeowner named Alex Harper, it was the culmination of years of quiet ambition, a modest two-story house with a garden you tended with care, its soil rich with the scent of damp earth and fresh herbs. The private road, a narrow strip of gravel and packed dirt, was yours by deed, a legal artery that ensured your family's freedom to come and go. It was a small thing, unremarkable to most, but to you, it was the pulse of your daily life. Until Karen Marshall, the HOA president, decided it was hers to control. Karen was no stranger to Willow Creek. Her presence was as constant as the summer heat, her voice sharp and unyielding, slicing through neighborhood meetings like a blade through soft fruit. She was a woman of meticulous order, her lawn manicured to an almost unnatural precision, each blade of grass aligned as if measured by a ruler. Her eyes, narrow and assessing, seemed to catalog every detail of the neighborhood, every untrimmed hedge, every car parked an inch too close to a curb. But it was her obsession with control that defined her. The HOA, under her reign, was less a community organization and more a personal fiefdom. Rules multiplied like weeds, no fences over 4 feet, no exterior paint without approval, no children's toys left visible after dusk, and now, it seemed, she had set her sights on your road. The blockade appeared overnight, without warning or consultation. You stood there that first morning, staring at the cones, their garish orange, a stark contrast to the muted greens and browns of the landscape. The air felt heavy, thick with the tang of gasoline from a nearby construction site, as if the world itself was conspiring to choke your freedom. You approached the barrier, your shoes crunching against the gravel, and noticed the ground beneath was scarred, torn up, as if someone had dragged the sawhorses into place with deliberate malice. A neighbor, old Mr. Callahan, shuffled by, his cane tapping a slow rhythm against the pavement. "Karen's work," he muttered, his voice low, as if speaking her name too loudly might summon her. "She's been eyeing that road for months." You learned quickly that the blockade wasn't just an inconvenience, it was a siege. Your family was stranded. Your daughter, Lily, couldn't get to school without a mile-long detour through a neighbor's yard, her backpack bouncing against her small frame as she trudged through dew-soaked grass. Your wife, Sarah, missed a critical work meeting, her car idling uselessly at the edge of the barricade, the engine's low growl a faint echo of your growing frustration. Deliveries piled up at the neighborhood's entrance, their drivers shrugging helplessly before turning away. The rhythm of your lives, once steady and predictable, was unraveling, thread by thread. Karen's reasoning, when it came, was as audacious as it was infuriating. At an emergency HOA meeting, held in the community center's fluorescent-lit hall, she stood at the podium, her posture rigid, her voice dripping with self-righteous authority. "The road," she declared, "poses a safety hazard. It's too narrow, poorly maintained, and a liability for the entire neighborhood." Her words were smooth, rehearsed, but her eyes betrayed a flicker of satisfaction as they met yours across the room. You raised your hand, your voice steady but laced with the heat of restrained anger. "It's my private road," you said, "deeded to my property. You have no jurisdiction." The room fell silent, the air thick with the scent of stale coffee and tension. Karen's smile was thin, almost serpentine. "The HOA has a duty to protect the community," she replied. "We'll see about the legalities." The legalities. That phrase lingered, a bitter aftertaste. You spent evenings poring over property documents, the crinkle of paper under your fingers, a stark contrast to the quiet of your home. The deed was clear, the road was yours, a fact Karen surely knew. Yet her blockade remained, unchallenged by the other HOA members, who averted their eyes or offered vague sympathies. You began to notice her influence everywhere, the way neighbors hesitated before speaking to you, the way Karen's car, a gleaming white SUV, patrolled the streets at dusk, its headlights cutting through the fading light like a predator's gaze. The days stretched into a week, each one heavier than the last. The blockade grew more elaborate, as if Karen were testing how far she could push. Wooden pallets appeared, stacked haphazardly, their splintered edges catching the morning dew. A chain, rusted but sturdy, was looped between two sawhorses, its links clinking softly in the breeze. You stood at your window each morning, watching the barrier solidify, your coffee growing cold in your hands. The scent of jasmine, once a comfort, now felt mocking, a reminder of a freedom you could no longer take for granted. You began to fight back in small ways. You filed complaints with the county, their office, a labyrinth of flickering lights and overworked clerks who promised to look into it. You spoke to neighbors, their voices hushed, their stories eerily similar. Karen had fined one for a mailbox deemed non-compliant, another for a dog that barked too loudly. Her power was a web, invisible but suffocating, and you were caught in it. Yet the more you pushed, the more immovable she seemed. At night, you lay awake, the creak of the house settling around you, and imagined yourself confronting her not with words, but with action. Something bold, something irreversible. The idea came to you on the 8th day, as you stood at the edge of the blockade, the gravel biting into the soles of your shoes. Karen's house sat just beyond, its lawn a pristine expanse of green, her pride and joy. You imagined it gone, replaced with something that would hit her where it hurt. Asphalt, a parking lot, a statement. The thought was absurd, reckless, but it took root, fueled by the constant struggle of your isolation. You didn't yet know how, but you knew you'd find a way to turn her world upside down, just as she had yours. The rhythm of your lives had been disrupted, but a new rhythm was emerging, one of defiance, of plans whispered in the dark. Karen had drawn a line, but you were ready to cross it. The air in Willow Creek carried a new edge now, sharp with the scent of rebellion and the faint metallic tang of machinery in the distance. Each morning, as you, Alex Harper, stood at your window, the blockade on your private road seemed to mock you, its orange cones and rusted chains, a constant reminder of Karen Marshall's grip on your life. But the seed of an idea had taken root, and it was growing, spreading like ivy through your thoughts. Karen's pristine lawn, her sanctuary of control, was about to become your battlefield. You imagined it buried under a smooth, unyielding layer of asphalt, her pride reduced to a parking lot. The thought was reckless, almost mad, but it thrummed with the rhythm of defiance that now defined your days. You began quietly, careful not to let the spark of your plan flare too brightly. The neighborhood was Karen's domain, her eyes and ears everywhere. Mrs. Ellison, who lingered too long at her mailbox, or the teenage dog walker who reported back to her for a crisp 20. You moved with purpose, your steps light against the hardwood floors of your home, the air inside heavy with the scent of old books and determination. At night, when the world was still, you sat at your kitchen table, its surface scarred from years of family meals, and began to research. The internet was a labyrinth of possibilities: local contractors, equipment rentals, zoning laws. You needed a crew willing to work under the radar, someone who wouldn't flinch at bending the rules. It was through a chance conversation with Mr. Callahan, his voice gravelly and low as he leaned on his cane, that you found your answer. "There's a guy," he said, his eyes glinting with the mischief of someone who'd seen too much to care about propriety. "Danny Ruiz. Runs a paving crew out of the next county. Doesn't ask too many questions if the cash is good." The name stuck, a pebble in the current of your thoughts. You tracked Danny down through a faded business card tucked into a diner's bulletin board, the paper soft and curling at the edges, smelling faintly of grease and coffee. A phone call later. You were sitting across from him in a dimly lit bar, the air thick with the yeasty scent of beer and the low hum of conversation. Danny was a man of few words, his hands calloused and stained with the black of asphalt, his eyes sharp but not unkind. You explained the situation, not the full truth, but enough: a neighbor's overreach, a private road blocked, a need to send a message. "Her yard," you said, your voice steady despite the pulse hammering in your throat. "I want it paved. All of it." Danny raised an eyebrow, his fingers drumming a slow rhythm on the table. "That's bold," he said, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "Expensive, too." You slid an envelope across the table, the paper crisp with the weight of your savings. He didn't count it, just nodded. "Night job," he said. "Less eyes. We'll need a week to prep." The plan took shape in the shadows. Danny's crew was a motley group, tough men with weathered faces, their clothes dusted with the grit of their trade, their laughter rough but genuine. They worked out of a rented lot on the edge of town, where the air was thick with the acrid smell of tar and the clank of heavy machinery. You visited once, under the cover of dusk, the sky bruised with purple and gold. The sight of the paving equipment grate, hulking beasts of steel and rubber sent a shiver through you. This was real. There was no turning back. Back home, you kept up appearances. You waved to neighbors, your smile tight but convincing, as you pushed Lily's bike through the grass to avoid the blockade. You attended another HOA meeting, where Karen stood at her podium, her voice slicing through the room like a cold wind. "The road issue is under review," she said, her eyes locking onto yours for a moment too long. You nodded, your face a mask, while your mind churned with the rhythm of your secret. The blockade had grown even more fortified concrete barriers now, their surfaces rough and unyielding, as if Karen sensed your defiance and meant to crush it. You spent your evenings planning logistics, your pen scratching against paper as you mapped out Karen's yard from memory. It was a half-acre of perfection. Emerald grass, rose bushes that bloomed with surgical precision, a stone path that curved like a painter's stroke. You imagined it gone, the earth flattened, the roses crushed under the weight of asphalt. The thought was intoxicating, but you tempered it with caution. You studied permits, though you had no intention of filing them. You checked weather forecasts, the air in your home now carrying the faint musty scent of old maps and determination. The crew would move at midnight when Willow Creek slept, the only sounds the distant bark of a dog and the whisper of leaves. In the breeze, Sarah noticed the change in you. Over dinner, the clink of forks against plates, a soft counterpoint to your thoughts. She reached for your hand. "You're planning something," she said, her voice low, her eyes searching. You didn't lie, but you didn't tell her everything. "Just fixing things," you said, squeezing her hand. Lily, oblivious, chattered about school, her voice a bright thread in the tapestry of your resolve. You wanted her to grow up free, unburdened by the constant struggle of Karen's tyranny. This was for her, for Sarah, for the life you'd built. The night before the job, you walked the perimeter of Karen's property, the grass cool and damp under your shoes. Her house loomed in the dark, its windows black, the silence broken only by the faint hum of a sprinkler system. You could almost smell her pride, the clipped scent of fresh-cut grass, the waxy sweetness of her roses. You imagined the chaos to come, the roar of machinery, the thick, choking smell of hot asphalt, the look on her face when she saw her sanctuary destroyed. It wasn't just revenge, it was justice, a reclamation of the rhythm of your lives. Danny called at dawn, his voice clipped. "We're set, midnight, be ready." You spent the day in a haze, the world around you muted, the chatter of neighbors, the warmth of the sun, the scent of coffee in your kitchen. Everything felt like a prelude to the moment when the first roller would touch her lawn. You didn't sleep that night. You stood at your window, watching the blockade, its chains glinting under the streetlights. The rhythm of your lives was about to change again, and this time, you were the one setting the tempo as midnight approached. You heard the low rumble of Danny's trucks in the distance, their engines, a deep, primal growl. The air was cool, heavy with the promise of action. You stepped outside, your breath visible in the night, and waited for the chaos to begin. The night wrapped Willow Creek in a heavy silence. Broken only sound, the low, predatory growl of Danny's paving trucks as they rolled into position. You, Alex Harper, stood at the edge of your property, the cool air sharp with the scent of damp grass and the faint, oily temps of machinery. Karen's lawn, a pristine canvas of green and perfect under the moonlight, was about to be erased. The rhythm of your lives, so long dictated by her control, was on the verge of a violent rebirth. As the first truck's headlights swept across her yard, their beams cutting through the dark like a primal scream, you felt a surge of defiance, tempered by the weight of what was to come. Danny's crew moved with practiced efficiency, their silhouettes stark against the glow of floodlights they'd rigged up. The air grew thick with the acrid stench of hot asphalt, a choking, visceral presence that clung to your throat. The rollers hummed, their steel drums glinting as they pressed forward, flattening the earth with a slow, relentless rhythm. The grass disappeared first, its vibrant green smothered under a slick black tide. Karen's prized rosebushes there, petals soft and heavy with midnight dew, crumpled under the weight of machinery, their faint sweetness drowned by the tarry reek. You watched from the shadows, your heart pounding, the scene unfolding like a fevered dream, both calculated and chaotic, a controlled explosion of your resolve. The noise woke the neighborhood. Windows flickered to life, their soft curtains twitching as curious eyes peered out. You'd expected this, planned for it, but the suddenness still jolted you. Karen's front door flew open, a rectangle of light spilling onto what was left of her lawn. She stood there, a figure of raw fury in a disheveled robe, her hair a wild halo under the porch light. "What is this?" she shrieked, her voice a high, jagged edge slicing through the rumble of the rollers. She didn't see you at first, her gaze fixed on the destruction teeth, asphalt now covering a third of her yard, the stone path she'd bragged about at HOA meetings reduced to a faint outline under the air thick with dust and grit. You stepped forward, your shoes crunching against the gravel of your own road, still blocked by her barricade, its chains glinting mockingly in the distance. "Evening, Karen," you said, your voice calm but laced with steel. Her eyes snapped to you, narrowing to slits, and for a moment the world shrank to the space between you to the air charged, heavy with the scent of her rage and your defiance. "You did this," she spat, her voice trembling with accusation. "You're destroying my property." The irony wasn't lost on you, but you didn't flinch. "Just reclaiming what's mine," you said, nodding toward the blockade. "Thought I'd start here." She lunged, faster than you'd thought possible, her nails clawing at the air like talons. You dodged, stumbling back onto the still warm asphalt, its surface rough and sticky under your palms. The crew froze, their tools clattering, as Karen advanced, her screams raw and unhinged. "I'll have you arrested. You'll lose everything," she shrieked, her voice a shrill counterpoint to the low drone of the machinery. Danny stepped in, his broad frame a barrier, but Karen was beyond reason. She grabbed a shovel from the ground, its blade flashing in the floodlight, and swung it with wild force. The metal grazed your shoulder, a sharp sting blooming across your skin, blood seeping through your shirt in a warm, slow trickle. The brawl erupted. Not chaos for its own sake, but a collision of will's wire, quiet rebellion meeting her naked entitlement. You wrestled the shovel free, its wooden handle slick with sweat, and tossed it aside, the clatter lost in the roar of the crowd that had gathered. Neighbors spilled onto the street, old Mr. Callahan, Mrs. Ellison, even the teenage dog walker teether, faces a blur of shock and fascination. The air thick with the scent of their whispers and the faint tang of spilled coffee from someone's cooler mug. Karen came at you again, her fists this time, her nails raking your cheek in a flash of pain that sharpened your focus. You pushed her back, not hard, just enough to create distance, your breath ragged but steady. "Enough," Danny's voice boomed, his crew forming a loose circle, their presence a warning. Karen staggered, her chest heaving. her robe slipping to reveal a shoulder mottled with old bruiser's marks that didn't nothing to do with you, but hinted at a life of conflict. Beyond the HOA's reach, she didn't stop. She turned to the crowd, her voice a venomous plea. You see this? He's a monster. He's destroying our neighborhood. But the crowd wasn't hers anymore, not entirely. You saw it in their eyes, to the way they lingered. On the asphalt, on the blockade, on you. They'd felt her power too, in their own ways, the constant struggle of her rules, choking their lives. You seized the moment, your voice rising, not loud but clear, carrying the weight of your truth. This is about her, you said, pointing to the barricade, its concrete barriers looming in the dark. She blocked my road, my family's lifeline. This, you gestured to the asphalt. This is what happens when you push too far. The words landed like stones in still water, ripples spreading through the crowd. Karen's face twisted, her lips parting, but no sound came. For the first time, she looked small, her power fraying like a flag in a storm. But the confrontation wasn't end there. Karen, cornered, rallied. She pulled out her phone, her fingers trembling as she dialed 911, her voice a low hiss as she spoke of vandalism, assault, chaos. The crew shifted, uneasy, their tools glinting in their hands as they glanced at Danny. He nodded, a silent signal, and they began to pack up, the rollers falling silent, the air growing heavy with the fading heat of asphalt and the promise of trouble. Sirens wailed in the distance, their pitch rising like a warning bell. You stood your ground, blood trickling down your cheek, the pain a faint echo of your resolve. The police arrived, their lights painting the scene in red and blue, the air now sharp with the scent of exhaust and tension. They questioned you, Karen. The neighbors, their voices clipped and professional. Karen pointed to her yard, her voice breaking as she described her loss. But the officers' eyes lingered on the blockade, its illegality impossible to ignore. You showed them your deed, the paper worn but clear, its words a shield. The crowd murmured, their whispers a soft rhythm against the chaos, some nodding, others averting their eyes. As the police took statements, you noticed something, a flicker of fear in Karen's eyes, not just at the asphalt, but at the questions they asked about the barricade. She stammered, her usual authority faltering, her hands twisting the edge of her robe. The rhythm of your lives was shifting again. The confrontation, not an end, but a doorway to something deeper, something Karen had fought to keep hidden. The night ended with the crew gone, the asphalt cooling under the stars, and Karen retreating to her house, her door slamming with a finality that felt temporary. You stood on the new pavement, its surface alien but yours, blood drying on your skin, the air thick with the scent of victory and unanswered questions. The morning after the confrontation dawned heavy, the air in Willow Creek thick with the lingering scent of asphalt and unrest. You, Alex Harper, stood at the edge of Karen's transformed yard. Its once pristine lawn, now a stark expanse of black, the surface still warm under the soles of your shoes. The blockade on your private road remained, its concrete barriers and rusted chains a stubborn scar across the gravel. But the rhythm of your lives felt different. Karen's power, once unyielding, was fraying, and the neighborhood was beginning to see it. But the victory you'd tasted in the chaos of the night was not yet complete. There was more to her scheme, and you were determined to expose it. The police presence lingered into the morning, their cruisers parked at angles along the street, their radios crackling with a low, steady rhythm. The neighbors, drawn by the spectacle, gathered in clusters, their voices a soft murmur carried on the breeze, scented with the faint sweetness of blooming jasmine and the sharp temps of coffee from their mugs. You felt their eyes on you, some wary, some curious, a few glinting with quiet approval. Old Mr. Callahan leaned on his cane, his weathered face creased with a knowing smile. "You stirred the hive," he said, his voice rough but warm. "Now watch the bees scatter." Karen was nowhere to be seen, her house silent, its curtains drawn tight against the morning light. But her absence felt like a pause, not a retreat. You replayed the confrontation in your mind, her wild eyes, the stammer in her voice when the police questioned the blockade, the way her hands twisted the edge of her robe. There was something she was hiding, something beyond the HOA's petty tyranny. The blockade wasn't just about control. It was a piece of a larger puzzle, and you were determined to find the edges. You began digging, quietly at first, your movements careful to avoid Karen's web of informants. The county records office was your first stop, a squat building with flickering fluorescent lights and the musty scent of old paper. You pored over property records, the crinkle of pages under your fingers, a steady counterpoint to your racing thoughts. Your deed was clear, the road was yours, a fact Karen had ignored. But as you sifted through HOA filings, you found something curious, a series of complaints, all dismissed, about road access across Willow Creek. Neighbors had reported similar blockades, temporary but deliberate, each tied to Karen's name. The pattern was subtle, woven into years of paperwork. But it was there. She was choking off private roads, one by one. A conversation with Mrs. Ellison, hesitant and whispered, over her picket fence, confirmed your suspicions. "She tried it with us 2 years ago," she said, her hands nervously pruning a rosebush, its petals soft and heavy with dew. "Blocked our driveway for a week, claimed it was under review. We paid a fine to make it stop." The air around her was thick with the scent of fresh-cut stems and fear. She glanced at Karen's house, her voice dropping. "She's got plans, Alex, big ones. Talks about unifying the neighborhood's roads." The word hung between you, heavy with implication. Unifying, control. You turned to the internet, your laptop screen casting a pale glow across your kitchen table, the air now carrying the faint bitterness of overbrewed coffee. Posts on local forums, buried in threads from months past, hinted at Karen's ambitions. A neighbor had overheard her at a county meeting, her voice sharp as she pitched a plan to annex private roads into an HOA-managed network. For safety, she'd said, but the subtext was clear: power. She wanted every road under her thumb, a toll gate on the rhythm of your lives. Your blockade was no accident, it was a test case, a bold move to see how far she could push before the neighborhood pushed back. The asphalt on her yard had been your push, but it was also a spark. The neighbors, once cowed, were talking now. At a makeshift gathering in Mr. Callahan's backyard, the air thick with the scent of charcoal and grilled meat, they shared their stories. Fines from minor infractions, threats over unapproved mailboxes, even a whispered rumor that Karen had bribed a county official to overlook her violations. The crowd was small but growing, their voices a low hum of defiance, the constant struggle of her reign no longer a private burden but a shared one. You stood among them, your cheek still stinging from her nails, the dried blood a faint itch under your skin. "She's not invincible," you said, your voice steady. "We've got proof." The proof came together, piece by piece. A retired lawyer neighbor, Mrs. Patel, offered to review the HOA's bylaws. Her dining room table, covered in papers that smelled of ink and time. She found discrepancies, funds, misallocated meetings, held without proper notice, Karen's signature on documents she had no authority to sign. You contacted a local journalist, a young woman named Clara, with a nose for scandal. Her notepad scribbled with notes as she listened to your story. The air in her cramped office was heavy with the scent of printer, toner, and ambition. "This could be big," she said, her eyes bright. "Give me a week." Clara's article hit the local paper like a stone through glass. Headlined HOA Power Grab, One Woman's War on Willow Creek. It laid bare Karen's scheme, her blockades, her fines, her plan to control the neighborhood's roads. The story spread, amplified by posts on X, where neighbors shared photos of the asphalt-covered yard and the blockade, their captions laced with outrage and dark humor. The rhythm of your lives was shifting, the neighborhood waking from its stupor. Karen's SUV, once a fixture of her evening patrols, stayed parked, its white paint dulled by dust. The final blow came at a county hearing, the room sterile and cold, the air sharp with the scent of polished wood and bureaucracy. You presented your evidence, deeds, complaints, Clara's article, even a grainy photo of the blockade snapped by a neighbor's security camera. Karen was there, her posture rigid, her voice clipped as she defended her actions. "It's about safety," she insisted, but the county officials weren't buying it. They ordered the blockade removed, citing your deed and her lack of authority. The room buzzed with murmurs, the air electric with the scent of justice. But the victory had a twist. As the hearing ended, Clara pulled you aside, her voice low. "There's more," she said, handing you a folder. Inside were records of Karen's dealings with a developer, a shadowy figure who'd been buying up land on the edge of Willow Creek. Her road scheme wasn't just about control, it was about profit, a plan to funnel access through her unified roads to inflate property values for a sale. The betrayal stung, not just for you, but for every neighbor who'd lived under her. The blockade came down that week. The concrete barriers hauled away, the gravel of your road once again open under the sun. Karen's house went quiet, her lawn a black scar, her power broken. You stood on your porch, the air soft with the scent of jasmine, Lily's laughter echoing from the yard. The rhythm of your lives was yours again, reclaimed through chaos and courage, with a twist of truth that left Karen's empire in ruins.